Everyone, happy Sunday. Today is October 12th in America. I am in Central Time. I'm located in Des Moines, Iowa. Welcome to Dr. J's Prescription for Health. Today you can ask questions, medical questions. So this is a live Q&A. I do have some things planned, some questions that were already raised between yesterday's live stream and today's. So thank you very much for that. Right now, we are live on Instagram and YouTube. As a reminder, this is not medical advice. It's for information purposes only. I will be happy to answer your questions if, in fact, I do know the answer. So, all right, you guys. Where do you want to begin? Because I have some things planned, but I want to ask if you guys got any questions to let me know. Okay? If you are listening on YouTube right now, if you are not already subscribed, please do so. If, again, same thing on Instagram, hit the likes up or thumbs up button, the share button, do the clickety clack. It helps me, it helps the algorithm find out who I am and what I do. Yesterday, there was an Instagram listener who tried to find me on YouTube by searching IronLadyDoc, which that is what I'm under. However, it is still difficult to find me, so IronLadyDoc Malea Jensen would help in this instance to find me better on YouTube. So IronLadyDoc, and then put in there Malea Jensen. So IronLadyDoc Malea Jensen, and it should go right to me. Eventually, I think the algorithm will find me as simply IronLadyDoc. All right. Yesterday, we spoke a little bit about the differences in plant-based diets and animal-based diets. Now, without sounding biased, because I am an animal-based consumer, I don't consume plants, but I also don't want to steer away from talking to plant-based individuals who are thriving. What I like to mention to them or to you and to provide information. Plants, are anything but animals. How about that? So if it does not come from an animal, it comes from a plant. Hello, Texas Hauler. I appreciate you being here. And Anthony, I appreciate it. So plant consumers have to understand that plants are full of oxalates and phytates and saponins and tannins and protease inhibitors and lectins and fiber, and plants lack certain things. In fact, all of the things I just mentioned that are in plants, oxalates, phytates, tannins, saponins, lectins, fiber, can also decrease the absorption of vitamins and minerals and amino acids and iron. So all of these things can be diminished if we are consuming a plant-only diet. So in my eyes, again, this is in my eyes, how can a diet that is plant-based only, vegan, be considered healthy when supplements are needed? Because if supplements are needed, that diet is basically a diet of malnourishment, okay? You will be malnourished if, so here's one from Tone. Plants are full of a lot of vitamins, okay? But they also have the oxalates, phytates, tannins, saponins, lectins, fiber that decrease the absorption of those particular, you didn't mention any vitamins or minerals, but you must not be aware that the plant anti-nutrients that are in plants actually decrease the absorption of all the you call phytonutrients. So again, if you're supplementing and you want to continue to eat your plants, consume them. That is up to you. I'm just giving you information. So you can tell me all day long, hey, vitamins and minerals are in plants, vegetables, let's say. I would agree with you, but you can't get to them. All right? Now, what do plants, Manuel, I think it's Manuel, asks where I'm from. I'm from Des Moines, Iowa. I'm in the United States. Tone says you get a lot of iron from asparagus. What kind of iron, you guys, does plants have? So we should answer that for Tone so he's well aware. Okay? Tone, the iron that is in plants, all plants, is non-heme iron. Non-heme iron is maybe 3% absorbed. So meaning you're not getting enough heme iron. You're not getting enough iron. And if you are relying only on non-heme iron, which plant-based people do. I can go into all of these things, but oxalates and phytates decrease the absorption of anything that's positively charged, meaning zinc, calcium, selenium, your B vitamins, amino acids, all of these things are decreased, the absorption are decreased in a plant-based diet, okay? What do plants lack? Plants absolutely lack B12. If you are on a plant-based diet, you cannot get enough B12 in order to survive. In fact, we've known about deficiency of B12 for a long time, meaning we have a diagnosis for it, and it's called pernicious anemia. Symptoms of pernicious anemia is a red swollen tongue. We can get fatigue, weakness, numbness, tingling, headaches, depression, irritability, dizziness. Those are all neurological signs from a lack of B12. Now, can individuals who consume a standard American diet, can they get B12 deficient? Absolutely. Again, we could be eating a combination of plants and animals and be lacking in B12 because the plants block the absorption of B12. All right? I'll finish what I'm doing, and if you could ask that question when we're done talking about the plants. Okay? So, plants absolutely lack B12. All right? They also lack DHA and EPA. So you guys are well aware that there are essential amino acids, there are essential fatty acids, and there are no essential carbohydrates, 0. Goose egg. So DHA, an essential fatty acid, it's actually a polyunsaturated fatty acid. It's an omega-3. It makes up about 20% of the fat that makes up our brain. So it's needed, okay? It's very important that we have DHA. Now, plants lack DHA and EPA. EPA, also an omega-3, can be converted to DHA. Now, what do plants have that can be converted to DHA and EPA? That would be ALA, okay? Plants have ALA, but the conversion to DHA and EPA is poor, okay? In fact, the amount that can be absorbed is about 0.01%. So a tenth, less than a tenth of a percent that can be converted. So it's important that if you are on a vegan diet, that you are getting your essential fatty acids, and most choose a form of alga oil or algae oil, and that will give them the DHA and the EPA. Now, again, I know that many people will say, yeah, but flax and chia and all of that contain ALA. But again, the conversion it's very hard. You guys, we are live on YouTube and on Instagram right now. As a disclaimer, this is not medical advice. It's for information purposes only. So if you have a question, let me know by putting a Q in front of your question. Chill says, so eating more meat than plants is better. Vegans are trying to get him to, or get Chill to try to eat plants. Chill, that is absolutely up to you. I'm telling you that meat contains, especially grass-fed meat, contains vitamin D, B12, vitamin K2, vitamin A, EPA, DHA, creatine, carnosine, choline, carnitine, heme iron, taurine, zinc. Those things are either lacking or they are deficient in plant foods. So you have to decide on your own. If you're doing a combination of, plants and animal, you might see that as a balanced diet. You have to be aware that the plants you consume will decrease the absorption of your zinc, selenium, calcium, magnesium, amino acids, B vitamins. A lot of things are being destroyed or not being absorbed because of the anti-nutrients that are in plants. Now, there are certain ways that you can cook these plants that will help diminish the amount of oxalates and phytates and tannins and protease inhibitors and lectins, and that is usually through a cooking. And the cooking I would recommend that you probably boil these things for at least 20 minutes before eating them. Okay, so if you want to eat spinach, boil it. I would not eat raw spinach. Okay. No, Raj, I am from America. Okay. So if you have a question, put a Q in front of it and we will go on. All right. So plants not only lack B12, they lack DHA and EPA. They lack creatine. Creatine. Our body makes about 1 gram a day. Is that enough? No. Only meat has creatine. I'm guessing that most vegans will take a creatine supplement. All right. What else do they lack? What else do plants lack? We mentioned heme iron. Heme iron is only found in red meat. I recommend ruminant red meat. Okay? Heme iron is 30% absorbed versus the non-heme iron, which is only about 3% absorbed. Plants lack or are deficient in D. I agree that our skin can take in the sunlight and help make vitamin D. I would suggest that it's difficult, even for myself, to get adequate sunlight, especially in where I'm from, in the Midwest of the United States, and it's very cold. We don't get out or you can't expose your skin. So a supplement or eating dairy is in your best interest. Calcium. There's not enough calcium in plants. Again, dairy is a source. Zinc. Also, I mentioned this earlier, phytates actually decrease the absorption of zinc. So even if the zinc is in your plants, the anti-nutrient of phytates help to block the absorption. So there's a lot of things that can be going on with, our inability to absorb these things. So if you have questions, let me know. That Azim, does red meat increase chances of getting cancer later in life? I would suggest to you that if you eat meat in the presence of chemicals, you have an increased risk of getting bowel cancer. There are particular chemicals that have been studied that absolutely cause bowel cancer, and they are azoxymethane, so azoxomethane and dimethylhydrazine. These are chemicals that actually are studied to cause I'm just reading another question, that have been shown to cause bowel cancer. I think that eating animal products alone, no, I believe that the studies are probably anecdotal, they're correlational, they're not randomized clinical trials. There's not really any nutritional studies that are randomized clinical trials, so we really can't go one way or another, although, your plant-based friends will likely bring up these studies in order to show that there are increased risks of cancer in meat eaters. I think it's meat eaters in the presence of all the other chemicals. And that goes the same for a vegan. You start adding in chemicals from things that are processed, which most vegans, I don't know, but I'm guessing or speculating that most vegans eat whole foods and the chemicals are not going to be present. It's when you start adding in processed foods to any diet, that's where you're going to have problems. Gigalad, sorry if I pronounce your name wrong. Alpha-Gal syndrome, I don't know how it's spelled. That's fine. Does that ruin the body's natural response to creatine? If you have alpha-gal, which I believe is not only from simply a tick bite, I think that people can get alpha-gal without having been bit by a certain Lone Star tick. We can get alpha-gal. It's an intolerance to usually red meat. And I believe that you can, over time, decrease the sensitization. So to answer your question, it's not the fact that alpha-gal is causing the low creatine. It's the fact that when you have alpha-gal, you likely will not be eating any red meat, and red meat contains the most creatine. Can you still get creatine from other animal-based sources? Yes. So there is a test for alpha-gal. They are antibodies. So again, if you have a question, okay, here's a question from Sauce. How much vitamin D is necessary to take a day? I would get your levels checked first. So see your primary care physician. This is not a substitute for your primary care, but I would get your level of vitamin D. And you want to stay in a range between 50 and 100. If it's below 50, it's too low. And it risks increasing your risk of getting immune compromised. But vitamin D is needed for it's actually a hormone. It's not a vitamin D, or it's not a vitamin. And Helio asks, what do you do for type 1 diabetes? Well, I'm hoping that your doctor gives you insulin. That is the treatment for type 1 diabetes because they lack insulin. Yangani says hello from South Africa. Hello. Jess asks, what is alpha-gal? It's ALPHA, alpha, and then gal, GAL. So alpha-galactose, it's a sugar. So it's an intolerance to a particular sugar that is in meats. And if you have that intolerance, you'll know it. You get, over time, it builds up. I actually have had 3 alpha-gals diagnosed in probably the last year to 2 years, and they are already back. They went off of red meat, and they're already back on consuming red meat. Their body was very inflamed. But again, I think they went from in an inflammatory, fairly standard American diet to a carnivore diet with mainly red meat, eggs, maybe a little bit of chicken or poultry, maybe a little bit of eggs. And they started getting symptoms of fatigue, maybe a rash, but just a generalized not feeling so well. When I suggested they be tested for alpha-gal, again, 3 of them were positive. We abstained from any red meat for 3, 4, 5 months, and they went back on it. They slowly added back into it, and guess what? They are tolerating red meat again. Passion says, my dad got Lyme disease from a tick. Exactly. That's ticks carry Lyme. Let's see. Cool Kid, where are you from? Let us know. Sammy says, I'm a C2 complete quadriplegic and I'm ventilator dependent. I'm watching you with my nurses. How are you? I'm doing well. And I hope you're doing well as, you know, Sammy, thank you for joining in. Tell your nurses I said hello. That's amazing that they're there right now. Manuel is from Brazil. Thank you for joining. Where are you guys listening from? Let's see. So if you have a question, put a Q in front of it. Otherwise, there's a lot of you guys just putting comments in here. Darren says, if you have type 1 diabetes, all you can really do is insulin replacement and watch your diet and sugar carefully. Consider getting the automatic sensors they have nowadays. Yeah, Darren, most type 1 diabetics are actually on an insulin pump, and those are hooked up with the Dexcoms or Freestyle, but mainly with Dexcoms, which is a continuous glucose monitor. Azim asks, do you recommend eating soybeans as a source of proteins? Is that because you are a vegan? Are you using that for your protein source because you're vegan? I heard on many fitness blogs that it causes gynecomastia. Any thoughts on this? Soy is definitely estrogenic, and if you are a male and you want to avoid gynecomastia, I would not use soy or any other estrogenic, chemicals, consume them. Soy is huge. We actually give it to our babies in formulas, and I think that's wrong. But again, that is my opinion. I'm sure, Azim, that there are many vegans out there that is using soy for a protein source, and that's great. Michelle says, good morning from California, Dr. J. On a carnivore diet, do you get enough calcium or need as much do you get? Michelle, I'm having trouble with your question, but yes, I get enough calcium. And again, I eat some dairy, I eat butter for sure. I eat a little bit of cheese, and I also consume heavy whipping cream, so heavy cream. And so, yeah, I'm getting enough calcium. If you're worried about whether or not you're getting enough of the vitamins, and you really should get labs. Really get labs, okay? If you're worried about your B12, B12 is necessary, okay? And no, vegans have said, I get enough B12 from the dirt that my veggies grow in, or the dirt that's left on the veggies, I don't wash them off, and that's simply not true. Get a B12 level. You want a level close to 1,000. Your B12 level should be close to 1,000. So thanks for that question, I appreciate it. Hi, Deepak. Thank you for listening from India. I appreciate it. Dark Rain says, a bit of a stretch here, but have you heard of any home things or home remedies to help with mild symptoms of Crohn's disease? I've been dealing with it for 5 years, only got diagnosed 3 months ago with no information on You know, Dark Rain, there is a gentleman that had Crohn's and actually has had part of his bowel removed. And he's very interesting young man, and he's not from America, I don't believe. And he was he was a guest with Dr. Anthony Chafee at one time. He's probably been a guest of many because his story is it's so phenomenal. If you haven't heard about this guy, and he actually has a YouTube channel, I'm trying to think of his name, but he went completely carnivore and basically cured his Crohn's disease. I mean, it's an amazing story. The guy almost died. His story is it's phenomenal. So anybody listening on YouTube or Instagram, look this guy up. He's on YouTube. He's been a guest on many. I'm pretty sure I first saw him when I was listening to Dr. Anthony Chafee from Australia. Sammy says recently this is Sammy, the C2 injury, quadriplegic on a ventilator, requiring 24-hour care, round-the-clock support. And Sammy, I am so sorry to hear this, but it sounds like you have great support, and I think we can find joy and happiness in our life. I will pray for you, and I'm sure those who I know who are prayer warriors on Instagram, I know you're listening right now, that we're all going to pray for Sammy, pray for strength, and pray for his nurses, pray for his 24-hour support and care. That's awesome that, you are getting on here and you feel that you want to share this with all the listeners. Just amazing. I appreciate that. Harry states badly depressed and wanted some advice. And I would suggest that for depression, these are things that really need to be discussed with your primary care physician, and to get, either medications or behavioral counseling, or seek psychiatry, or seek therapy. There's so many things that can be done, but the people who just sit back and don't reach out and don't get help. So the fact that Harry's reaching out on the internet and trying to seek care is amazing. And again, we'll put Harry in our thoughts and prayers, but seeing your physician is important. And please don't hold back on doing that. It's very important, okay? If you have a question, put a Q in front of it so I can pick it up easier. Oh, here's a great question, you guys. And Lucy, I haven't forgot about you, so please keep going and remind me to answer your question. But RJJ says, are there any thoughts on colostrum? It alleviated autoimmune symptoms, asthma, hay fever, and my milk addiction. Half a gallon a day completely disappeared. So just to speak to your milk addiction, and really with dairy in general, it's the casomorphines that is in dairy that are very addicting to people. Not everybody has addictions to casomorphines. Sometimes we can get by with eating or drinking A2 casein in the form of your milk or your cheese. But there are, in fact, I had a friend who had an addiction, casomorphines, and it was with cottage cheese. They would eat containers of cottage cheese a day, and it's devastating. I mean, these people can't lose weight. They're hard. It's very difficult. Okay, so casomorphines, very common in people who consume dairy, and that's why a lot of people don't consume dairies, because they know that they have an addiction. If they still want to consume dairy, they usually choose the A2 forms. Now, my thoughts on colostrum. Colostrum is the first part of breast milk that comes out when we breastfeed our babies. And colostrum is Very, very important. There are people online who sell colostrum supplements, and I am happy to hear that it alleviated your autoimmune symptoms, your asthma, your hay fever. The colostrum is awesome. The lactoferrin. So if you've done some research on colostrum, you might want to do some research on, bovine colostrum. Exactly. Right, RJJ. I mean, there are women out there who actually online, this is a real thing. They actually sell their breast milk to people. So for extra money. But yeah, bovine colostrum. But look into bovine lactoferrin. Read up on lactoferrin. And while you're doing that, read on the apolilactoferrin. There's really only one source of apolilactoferrin that I know, and that is glucoferrin. So glucoferrin is apolilactoferrin. You want to ask me the difference? Lactoferrin contains iron. Apolilactoferrin does not. Glucoferrin also contains a trivalent chromium. Again, I have no affiliation. I'm just aware of this product. But glucoferrin has a trivalent chromium, heavy metals, especially iron. So it has an affinity for iron. And what I would maybe elaborate on is those of you who are vegan or you're eating or consuming a lot of non-heme iron, that non-heme iron, because it is not absorbable, only 3% is absorbable. Because it's not absorbable, it can deposit itself or get stuck in our organs. And the main area that it can get stuck is in our liver. Apolilactoferrin does not have iron. And apolilactoferrin, just like your colostrum, is very important. The benefits of having glucoferrin is not only for the apolilactoferrin, but also for the trivalent chromium that helps to bind this non-heme iron out of our system. So you guys that are on, well, anybody, because I'm going to tell you what, even myself, when I checked my levels, I was elevated. And, you know, if you were never breastfed and you took, you were on formula, you were formula fed, that has an incredible amount of non-heme iron fortification. Same with any processed food. So if you weren't breastfed and then you grew up eating a whole bunch of processed foods, you are going to have an accumulation over decades of non-heme iron. So get your labs checked, okay? You need to get a serum iron. So if you want to write it down, a serum iron, a ferritin level, a transferrin level, a TIBC, and you might want to get a protein S. So getting a CBC. It's very important that you check these things. God bless you too, Fulton. Get the iron, the ferritin, the transferrin, the TIBC. Do not settle with your doctor just getting an iron and a ferritin, or just simply getting a CBC and a ferritin. You need all of them. You also need to get liver function. If you've been eating a high non-heme iron diet for decades, you need to get your liver checked, okay? You need an AST, an ALT, and a GGT. Don't let it go. Azim says, and again, thank you for being a subscriber. I appreciate that, Azim. Most of the species of plants and vegetables we found in our supermarket are hybrids, or they have so much pesticides. Chicken are also given hormone injections. What to eat? Let's speak first to the plants and vegetables. I would agree that they are man-made. All of the seeds that we have now are man-made seeds. They are hybrids. They're genetically modified. We also pick our fruits and vegetables before they are ripe, and we ripen them either on the transit to the grocery store or the transit to your home. If you are going to eat fruits and vegetables, I would get them from like a farmer's market or just a private farmer where you know that they are not spraying chemicals on your plants, and also not picking them until they are absolutely ripe. Why is that? Let's just say you eat a banana, and I was a victim of this too. You would go and you would pick up the greenest ones, and you would allow them to ripen on your countertop, and they would last longer because you don't eat one every day, or you just, you dabble in eating bananas. Well, when we pick something like a fruit that is not ripe yet from the tree, actually, all of the toxic chemicals are present in that fruit when it's picked not ripe. If it is allowed to ripen on the vine, on the plant itself, those toxins, that many of the toxins, not all, but a lot of the toxins are able to go back in through the root system and down into the ground. So the ground, the leaves, the bark, the stem can reabsorb some of those chemicals. So you don't want to eat fruit that has been picked not ripe. It must be picked in the ripened state if you're going to eat these things. Now, as far as chickens giving hormones, you want to look for poultry that is pasture raised and organic. Now, when it comes to hormones, if anybody knows about hormones, you will know that, let's just say you're a male and you want to take testosterone. You can't just take one dose of testosterone and expect that your levels will stay elevated forever. You actually have to dose, depending on the testosterone ester. Is it a propionate, a cypionate, or enanthate? Depending on the ester that you are injecting, you can't really go longer than a week. Your levels will start to taper down. So farmers or ranchers aren't going to waste a bunch of money injecting their animals short of going to slaughter or going to kill. So what I mean by that is, if you're the rancher and you have a date that you're going to go to slaughter on October 1st, you're likely not going to waste money on your animals 2 or 3 months prior to that, because they're already reached their size that you were given their hormones to them for. Anyway, same with antibiotics. When we give antibiotics to patients, we have to dose it for 10 days or 14 days or however long that we have to dose the antibiotics. You can't just give one day and expect that it's killed. It's got to be every single day. If you don't give it every single day, the antibiotic dosing, the peak and trough go down and it's worthless. So the same with hormones. You give these things and they're out of that animal's body by the time you get it. Now, when it comes to poultry, remember that poultry are monogastric animals, whereas ruminant animals are multi-chambered animals. They have multi-chambered, they're polygastric. So not monogastric poultry, polygastric is your ruminant animals, okay? So your ruminant animals that are polygastric will have less amounts of, say, lectins or omega-6 fatty acids like alpha-linoleic acid. That is important to realize because chickens will, in their fat, contain these polyunsaturated fatty acids. So if they were fed grains, they're going to be having high amounts of omega-6 polyunsaturated fatty acid. And because they're only monogastric, their fat is going to contain that. So if you're eating chicken, I probably would not eat their fat. Whereas it's a ruminant, like a deer, bison, buffalo, sheep, lamb, elk, cow, I'm not afraid to eat their fat. In fact, I look to eat their fat. Okay? So that was a good question. Again, you have to decide for yourself, Azim, whether or not you want to eat poultry, whether or not you want to eat, vegetables, but you're taking a risk. There are washes that many people that still consume fruits and vegetables. There are vinegar washes with baking soda. You can just look them up. They're all over the, I don't know if your doctor will know about them, but they're all over the internet. If you have a question, put a Q in front of it. Otherwise, I skip over everything. Okay. Lucy, if you're there on Instagram still, can you repeat your question? I'd appreciate it because I can't find it. What a World says, I'm iron deficient despite treatment. Well, the treatment is non-heme iron. And you have to be aware that you might want to check into your copper level, What a World. If you have low copper, so get a copper or a ceruloplasmin level. If you're low copper, you're going to get increased amounts of stored iron in your liver. So get a copper level, okay? Remember, if you are consuming a lot of non-heme iron or it's built up in your liver for decades, your ferritin level can actually be low. So a too low ferritin or a too high ferritin are both detrimental. And doctors sometimes don't look into that adequately enough. So when you get the ferritin and your transferrin and your serum iron and a CBC and a TIBC, you put all of that in, and a liver function, you put all of that information together. So if you have a high hepcidin level, hepcidin, HEPCIDIN, that tells you that you are locking in iron in your liver. Your ALT, AST, GGT will likely be elevated. Those are your liver function enzymes. If you have low copper, as I mentioned before, your liver is absorbing and holding on, it's trapping the iron. Even if you're taking it in a supplement form or IV injections or however you're taking it, that's non-heme iron. It's hard to absorb that. They might even put in your injections vitamin C. Vitamin C helps to increase the absorption of that non-heme iron. But just be aware that you could give all the non-heme iron you want, and if you are trapping it in your liver, you're just poisoning your liver. Your liver is going to eventually get cirrhotic or fibrotic cirrhotic. It's just, yeah, you're looking at liver failure. So if you have a question over there, oh, okay, here's a question. Best ways to improve lung function. A friend is in hospital, appears that most tests were good. D-dimer was elevated, no blood clots in legs, allergy to iodine, so can't do a CT. Nobody has an allergy to iodine. Then you would be allergic to yourself, Lucy. You can be allergic to the dye itself, but not the iodine. Nobody's allergic to iodine because iodine is in every single cell, and without it, we would die. So if you were allergic to iodine, you'd be allergic to yourself and you would be dead by now. So something in the dye itself that they're using for the CT scan. That is, I'm guessing they're putting her on a blood thinner. I don't know. With a D-dimer elevated. Lara says, a coworker confided he has liver cancer. Doctor gave him 3 years to live. I wonder if we can heal that by long extended fasting. Can't the liver rejuvenate itself? Yes, the liver is probably the only organ or one of the only organs that can rejuvenate itself. And can it be reversed? I believe it can. I'm hoping or guessing, Lara, that this is not metastasized. Can you starve out a cancer? Yes, I believe they can. You can. There is, I just have a lot of books on my desk right here, but there is a book, Lara, that you might want to suggest to your coworker. It is called Cancer is Not a Disease, It's a Symptom, and it's by Ali Zaateri, Zaeteri. It was a phenomenal book. I like to read books on a lot of things, and this one was recommended to me. And it was phenomenal. It's just a whole new perspective on cancer. I've read books on Otto Warburg. I've read books I've listened to Dr. Seafried. Yeah, there's so much to learn. And to answer your question, Lara, Ali talks a lot about fasting. It's a phenomenal book. With contrast, they think it might be lung fluid. You know, you tap a sleeping bear, Lucy, and you could seed a cancer. He said it was from undiagnosed Hep C from decades ago. Well, there's treatments for Hep C. But yeah, I mean, any viral infection, viral, bacterial, fungal, parasitical, can cause cancer. And there might be one that's got the most. Lucy, there is, okay, so on Lovenox, so that's a blood thinner, how to improve oxygenation in lungs. One, giving oxygen. Two, there's pulmonary function. There should be a little exercises that you can do. There's a little tiny machine, a handheld machine. Lara says, so 6 tumors, are they all in the liver and nowhere else? So PET scan was negative otherwise? Let me know. So if you have a question, put a Q in front of it so I can readily pick it out. Jupiter says, isn't a lot of chicken lean enough that it wouldn't be high amount of fat? I agree. So if you're getting chicken breasts that are skinless, there's going to be a lot less fat. And I really think that you'll have, when it comes to the polyunsaturated fatty acids, you have less chance of getting so much omega-6. Omega-6 is usually more so in processed foods. Now, granted, we need our essential fatty acids. I'm not opposed to that. You just got to, because even red meat has omega-6, but we're over and above the amount of omega-6 that we need. We need about a 1-to-1 ratio of omega-6 to omega-3, and we are getting ratios upwards to 20 to 29 to 1. And that, I believe, is what's causing a lot of our insulin resistance. And you can say whatever you want to say in regards to polyunsaturated. I mean, there are many doctors who will tell you that, omega-3 fatty acids omega-6 fatty acids are healthy. They lower our LDL, and that's what we need. Again, I don't believe that. I don't believe LDL is the cause of heart disease. I think there are certain LDLs, the small dense, the ones that have been oxidized. I think we should be looking at small dense LDLs instead of just generally with a broad brush lowering. Some of these questions are irrelevant that I'm seeing, so. Okay, Larry does quantify, they are all in the liver. Well, I mean, that's a good sign, right? But Larry, get the book, or yeah, it's a phenomenal book. While we're talking about, or have talked about, polyunsaturated fatty acids, in general, let's just talk about fat. Fat in general is classified as either saturated, meaning there are no double bonds and it's stable. That means no peroxidation is occurring on that fat. There's no areas where it goes carbon, double bond, carbon. It's all saturated. So there's a hydrogen on every carbon. There's no double bonds. That is a saturated fat. Inside saturated fats you can have long chain fatty acids, medium chain medium chain fatty acids or short chain fatty acids. So saturated are either long, medium, or short. Then you can have monounsaturated fatty acids. They have one double bond. So there's going to be one area on that long chain that has a double bond where hydrogen is not attached. Okay? Then the third classification of fat is polyunsaturated fatty acids. There are saturated fats that are from animals, and there are saturated fats that are from fruits, the two being coconut and palm. So those are two types of fruit that have saturated fatty acids. Most people do not, or if you try to avoid all saturated fats, your body's going to end up making them. And how does that happen? It makes them from carbohydrates. So if you eat carbohydrates, you're going to increase insulin and you will de novo production. So inside your body make saturated fats. In fact, you will probably make more saturated fats from carbohydrates than you would eating saturated fats in animals. All right? That type of fat that you make that's created de novo in your liver from eating carbohydrates is called palmitic acid. It's, I believe, carbon 16. And this is a very, very inflammatory type of saturated fat that is made in our liver, and it's very inflammatory to our liver. Palmitic acid can sometimes be elongated and made into stearic acid, which is C18. But again, people who say, oh, I don't eat any saturated fat and I avoid it at all costs, then your body's making it. Medium chain triglycerides are like C12 or C10. Those are usually from coconut or palm. They're small enough that they skip being bound up by chylomicrons. So when I talk about medium chain and short chain, they are actually born to be burned. Whereas a saturated long chain fatty acid needs, when we consume it, let's just say we consume it, it's packaged by what we call chylomicrons. And chylomicrons are, when we eat that saturated fat, the liver has already made bile, and that bile is stored in the gallbladder if you have one. And then that gallbladder emulsifies the fat, and that emulsified fat gets packaged into chylomicrons and delivered up into the thoracic duct and then into the bloodstream. That is basically the process. In a simple terms, okay? There's many steps in that, but I just want to give you an idea. Now, medium chain and short chain fatty acids do not go through any of that. They go directly to the liver. They're being burned right away. They're an energy source. So for those of you, that were into bodybuilding, and maybe still are, they will take short or medium chain triglycerides, MCTs, short chain triglycerides, in the form of MCT oil. The C12 is the lauric, C10 is capric. And, they are great sources of fat. I think in capric, you can get that from goats, where C12 is from coconut. Okay? Now, short chain fatty acids, those are usually via fermentation. And your ruminant animals are already fermenting that for you. That's great. But some people will take sources like vinegar, like apple cider vinegar, and that is a great source of short chain fatty acids. Okay? Hey, Dr. Christy, we were just actually going through fats. So just to catch you up, Maria, thank you for joining. I appreciate it. Hello, Divine. I don't think I'm missing very many questions over here on YouTube. They go really fast, so it's hard to see. Whereas on Instagram, it seems like they're a little easier. Okay, so we just got done talking about saturated fatty acids. Now we're going to talk about monounsaturated fatty acids. Those are like olive oil, avocados, macadamia nuts. They have one double bond. So they are able to get peroxidized, but not quite as much as a polyunsaturated fatty acid. A polyunsaturated fatty acid has many double bonds, and they're very unstable. They can get oxidized or peroxidized very easily. When we talk about a fat being oxidized, we use the word peroxidation, okay? So our monounsaturated fatty acids, most of the fat that we have in our cells are monounsaturated, okay? They have the one double bond, the one double bond. We have, in fact, in meat, most people think that all meat is just plain saturated. It's not. Meat has all fat saturated, monounsaturated, even has some polyunsaturated. As I mentioned before, meat has omega-6, so it also has omega-3. Getting grass-fed versions is the best. So monounsaturated fat, an example is your extra virgin olive oil. It's oleic acid. Some is actually made from the long-chain fatty acid, palmitic acid. So there's ways to get it to be made, but most people for sources of monounsaturated fatty acids will use extra virgin olive oil. Again, these are not packaged. This type of monounsaturated fatty acids, they are, most of it is burned through oxidation in the mitochondria. So as far as the third classification of fat, polyunsaturated fatty acids, these I believe are the ones that we need in the least amount. They are essential fatty acids, omega-3 and omega-6. But like I mentioned before, we're getting way too many. Way too many. By the way, you guys on Instagram, I do have a live fundraiser for Rescue Rehab and Rehome. It is where I got my tallow, and I like to raise money for them. Good morning, Dr. Christie. Lara, I relate. Yeah, I would not eat that soup, but okay. All right, so polyunsaturated fatty acids are mainly from seed oils. There's the 3 C's and the 3 S's, so you can remember them. So the 3 C's are corn, canola, cottonseed, and then sunflower, safflower, soy, and then grapeseed. So you got basically the big 8 are the seed oils. The seed oils have been promoted as an healthy option to fat. I would not agree with that. You know, if you give yourself corn oil, which used to be huge. I remember we had corn oil in our house, canola, corn, sunflower, safflower, we had them all. My dad thought that they were good for us. He was told by his doctor to eat these oils and not eat any butter or not eat any red meat. We stopped eating red meat in our house. Guess what? My dad are these anyway. I do not believe that getting rid of butter was the answer, but it was to our doctor or his doctor. So really seed oils, they're called vegetable oils, but again, there is probably nothing about them that is a vegetable. And I would say that the most common polyunsaturated fatty acid is soybean. It's in everything. So if you look at all of your processed food, just look on the ingredient list, and soy will be in the highest amount. There will be some palm oil, which I'm not as opposed to. If you look at any of your nut butters, there'll be palm oil in there. But that one is kind of on shady grounds with me. The omega-3s we mentioned already. We went over DHA and EPA. If you're a plant-based consumer or you're a vegan, you don't get any DHA or EPA, and it must be supplemented. There's very little conversion of the ALA in plants that can be converted to DHA and EPA. You can use algae or alga oil for your DHA source, but you need it. So don't forget that, especially those who are just going into the vegan diet. Now, polyunsaturated fatty acids can be burned. That's great. but it's going to depend on your insulin. If insulin is high, eating carbohydrates, and insulin is high, you are going to store the polyunsaturated fatty acid. Here's where we get into the causes of what I feel are the main causes of insulin resistance. There's a lot of people, schools of thought, that say it's only sugar. So if you are consuming carbohydrates, your insulin goes elevated, hyperinsulinemia leads to insulin resistance. Okay. I'm not just solely in that boat. I believe that. I agree with that, but it's not the only thing. Some other things that can disturb the cell membrane and increase our chances of insulin resistance are heavy metals, including iron. Iron not only gets trapped inside the cell, it can get trapped on the cell membrane. When the cell membrane or inside the cell, heavy metals cause destruction of our mitochondria and destruction of the cell membrane. It makes our body more prone to insulin resistance. Okay? So we mentioned sugar, we mentioned heavy metals, polyunsaturated fatty acids, which we just got done talking about, especially omega-6 linoleic acid. That omega-6 polyunsaturated fatty acid can get stuck in the cell membranes. It destroys, as does sugar, and heavy metals, it destroys the lipid raft. The lipid raft is a docking station on the cell membrane. Like if we're talking about a fat cell, on the cell membrane is something called a lipid raft. And it is a docking station for the insulin receptor. When that docking station is destroyed, if the cell has polyunsaturated fatty acid in the form of too much omega-6, again, our cell membranes have 3 layers. You know, there's a cell layer, there's cholesterol in that, there's polyunsaturated fatty acids. There's the cell membrane is distinct. It has a certain boundary. And when that cell membrane is not working well, it can get leaky and inflamed. And that's one of the reasons why fat cells, start to leak their inner contents and cause problems. Let me make sure there's no questions here. Lara says in the olden days, people would lay onion beside a sick person and it would absorb the sickness. Did they get well, Lara? That's interesting. Dr. Christie says, I'm making beef shanks tonight. Awesome. Carla says liverwurst. What about it? Basically liver pate. Hi, Amanda. Are you saying you're eating liverwurst, or what are you asking? It doesn't have a question. All right, you guys. Any questions? Hi, Amanda. Let me make sure I'm not missing any over here. Kodak says, can I cure a ganglion inflammation? Where's it located? Through diet? Usually a ganglion, I'm guessing you're talking about a ganglion cyst, like on your hand or foot. Ganglion is an irritated nerve. And what happens is it gets filled full of fluid, and then it usually pops through the surface. You can get them on your wrist, anywhere where there's a joint. Like you can get a ganglion in this joint here. You can get a ganglion in your wrist joint here. And basically it's an irritation. That nerve, as it's coming out through that joint area, gets irritated. So it's very common in waist. And that joint space doesn't allow that nerve enough space to breathe. So it gets choked and fluid builds up around that within the sheath, and then a ganglion will form. A ganglion is usually filled with like a jelly-like substance. Some doctors will go in and suck out that jelly, and that's just enough to cause it to resolve on its own. Other times they have to be surgically removed. I mean, back in the day, like if we're talking about old tales and stuff, there would be people that would hit these ganglions with a book or slam them on a desk, and the ganglion would burst open inside and just resolve on its own. So ganglions. Do I think, can you heal them through diet? I mean, you could try it. I've never heard anybody say that, hey, if I go on a carnivore diet, I can heal my ganglion cyst. It isn't an inflammation, so it's possible. But you have to ask yourself, what have you done to increase the risk of getting a ganglion cyst? That was a good question. I appreciate that. I see you guys are talking about salt, so I'll let you guys over there on YouTube discuss that back and forth. Yeah, Ottoman, a ketogenic diet could be helpful for an inflammatory process that's going on in our body. Fasting can do the same, but again, you have to remember that cysts or tumors, they're walled off, and they're walled off for a reason. Usually they hold toxins. And so it's actually a defense mechanism that Kodak is getting the ganglion, because something he or she is doing is irritating. Same with a tumor. You can get a fatty tumor, you can get a cancerous tumor. It is a mechanism that the body uses to wall itself off, to put it, put it in its place. It's when it's allowed to burst, or we poke it, or things like that. Most times ganglions are benign, and most times tumors, for the most part, are cancerous. I mean, we can get benign lipomas. Anything that ends in an OMA, O-M-A, is a tumor. So a tumor of fat, a tumor, any can grow anywhere, thyroid tumor. I believe that it is a mechanism to protect us. And if we didn't have that mechanism, we would likely all be dead, because we have so many toxins in our body and we're walling it off at all times, same with your, you can even look at it with that I discussed earlier about iron being trapped in your liver. It's a protective mechanism, because if it was all in our bloodstream, okay, that could play havoc on all levels of other heavy metals or other minerals and vitamins. The fact that our body's walling it off, no, I don't want it walled off in my liver or any other organ. I want to use it. Our body needs it. Our cells need it. Just like they need iodine, just like they need zinc and selenium and B12s and everything that we talk about and learn about, our body naturally needs it, or else we wouldn't be talking about it. What we tend to do is, one, we don't look for deficiencies. We just blanket take things without even looking. And two, we don't rely on our diet to supply the things that our body actually needs. So if we need an essential fatty acid, why are we looking to take an omega-3 in a capsule that's rancid? You're thinking that you can just pour the fish into your capsule, give it to you within a day's time, and expect that it's not going to be rancid. I would never want omega-3 now that I know. I don't buy omega-3s over the counter any longer, because by the time you get them, they're already oxidized. They're like already starting to be corrupt, already on the shelf. And then we consume those. I just don't think that's a good idea. Okay. The Flavor Daddy, my channel is, I am a family practice physician. I practice in Des Moines, Iowa. This is not medical advice. It's for information purposes only, and it's a question and answer. So if you guys have questions, I try to answer them. RJJ says they always tasted pretty rancid. I agree. I mean, that's why the smell is. The smell is the rancidity. And then they try to block it with burpless ones and do all these other things, but rancid is rancid. You're trying to get something that you really need. Essential means we need to get it from our diet, and we end up taking a supplement form, and it's just not good. If you're afraid, that your omega-3s are low, consume more fish, get grass-fed beef, get pasture-raised eggs. They're higher in omega-3. You also want about a 1-to-1 ratio. So if you find that your Omega-6s are way too high. Just lower your omega-6 level. How do you do that? Get rid of the polyunsaturated fatty acids, usually from processed foods. So removing the omega-6 or lowering, you need some, or else you would not survive. But you need some omega-6, but we're getting way too much because we're eating all of this processed foods. You get just what you want in an animal-based, and even a vegan. If they're a whole food vegan, they're getting the omega-6. Bede says, I never bought them over the counter. I thought the whole idea of fish oil in a gel cap was very weird. It is. And so when I was really into helping people with getting their omega-3s, I truly knew that there was a problem with not getting enough essential fatty acids because people's diets just plain were crapola. That is my word. I made it up. It's crapola. And so what I did is actually prescribed Loveza. It is prescription omega-3 essential fatty acid. It was, could we say, cleaned up a bit, maybe less rancid. And so I knew that we probably should not be just consuming, in general, omega-3s in a fish oil capsule. Here, take this Loveza. And now, looking back, I suppose I did what was right at the time because I could have harped on the people and told them, stop eating your crappy diet, eat these other things. But maybe seeing 30 patients a day, that got too hard. It maybe got too hard and I gave up because I found that, hey, people aren't going to eat better. They don't want to. They want to continue eating their crappy foods and they want to take omega-3s to make sure they get enough omega-3s because they heard if you're low in essential fatty acids, you're going to get brain damage. It's possible. Jillian says, I read that some people who eat carnivore develop insulin resistance and that it might be due to protein turning into carbohydrates through gluconeogenesis. It wouldn't be, okay. I don't think it is the meat as much as it is something else that is causing glucagon to be released from the pancreas. Remember, there is two parts of a pancreas. There's an endocrine portion and an exocrine portion. And the endocrine portion, which makes up, you would think that it makes up most of the pancreas, but it does not. It only makes up a very small portion of the pancreas. But the endocrine portion has alpha cells and beta cells. The beta cells produce insulin. The alpha cells produce glucagon. And those alpha and beta cells talk to each other all the time. So if we need insulin, the beta cells will talk to the alpha cells and say, hey, calm down over there, alpha. We don't need any glucagon going on, okay? And the beta cells will release insulin because it sees sugar in on board. This talking to each other, the alpha and the beta cells, happens very well in somebody who is insulin sensitive. When a person starts becoming insulin resistant, the talk between them doesn't work very well. And so glucagon might be telling the liver to secrete sugar, glucose, make glucose, when it probably shouldn't. In times like this, I like to think about what could be increasing the liver to hear from the glucagon receptor or glucagon from the pancreas. And I would say that stress is a big one. So if we are stressed, our cortisol is elevated. We need some cortisol. We just don't need it in the amounts that we have it. And also our sympathetic system is high. So picture this, you don't sleep very well. So if you're not sleeping very well, you're not getting adequate rest, you're going to increase your cortisol production. And then cortisol is going to increase blood sugar, and then blood sugar is going to increase insulin. And over time, hyperinsulinemia is going to lead to insulin resistance. Also, in this same scenario, the person's not sleeping so well, they're going to wake up tired. And we see this with sleep apnea too, okay? So they're going to wake up tired, and then what do? They get a cup of coffee. The coffee will increase the sympathetic tone. So now you got a fight or flight reaction, which also increases blood sugar. All right? So anything that is stimulating is going to increase blood sugar, increase insulin, increase our risk of hyperinsulinemia, increase our risk of insulin resistance. So do I think it's the meat-only diet? You might want to consider adding more fat. If you add fat, which usually animal sources come with protein and fat, and that is just a natural way that they come, but maybe you need to increase the fat, which would slow down the protein amino acids that can spike blood sugar. I would also look into, you said just due to protein on a carnivore. Well, what is that carnivore consuming? Are they consuming protein powder? That is processed. It is denatured amino acids. And because of that, it's whey, there's very little fat in there. There's nothing to slow it down. It is a rush of amino acids, and those amino acids can spike glucose all by themselves. So yes, there's caveats to being carnivore and raising blood sugar, okay? We just have to keep that in mind. Not every person who is eating carnivore is getting insulin resistance. There's other things going on, and we have to look into that. What are they actually eating? Are they mostly protein and no fat? Are they stressed? Are they not sleeping? There's a lot. What about their medications? Are they on medications? Simply a blanket statement that says, I've read that some people who eat carnivore develop insulin resistance. Well, you've taken in absolutely no other variables. You got to measure all variables. That's a blanket statement that I can't get on board with. So you think says, good morning. Are CRPs a good test to get? Yes, I believe they are. I would get a high sensitive, so HS high sensitive dash CRP. I would get that test. It's a marker for inflammation. I think everybody should have a CRP done. Amanda says, is there a downside to using a GLP to reduce blood sugars to cut back on Toujeo and Humalog for each meal, eating minimal carbs currently? So being on insulin, I'm guessing, so Toujeo, a long-acting insulin, Humalog, a short-acting insulin, is there a downside? Well, there is a downside to any medications. There's a downside to Toujeo. There's a downside to Humalog. But keep in mind that when we describe a type 1 diabetic, or versus a type 2 diabetic, or a type 1 diabetic and a type 2 who's insulin dependent, I'm guessing that's you, but I don't know. So if you are insulin dependent, there is absolutely no or very little talk between the alpha and the beta cells in the pancreas of the endocrine portion of the pancreas. Okay, remember, there are beta cells that release insulin, and there are alpha cells that release glucagon. And so if you, a type 2, have let your diabetes go so far that oral medications will not work, and now your C-peptide is like 0, and your insulin level is like 1 or less, then you are in need of exogenous injectable insulin, whether it be a long-acting and a short-acting, or just a long-acting, or just a short-acting, whichever, okay? So just be aware that now that you're on insulin, your beta cells that have burned out, I'm guessing, are not talking to your alpha cells anymore. There is no amount of insulin that you could give yourself exogenously that will feed back and talk to the alpha cell. You couldn't give yourself enough exogenous insulin to talk to the alpha cell, to tell the alpha cell not to keep secreting glucagon, because the alpha cell senses that there's no insulin. So if insulin is low, that must mean, hey, we're not burning sugar. Does the liver need to make some sugar? So people who are type 1 or they're insulin dependent type 2s are always chasing their sugar, their blood sugars, because of glucagon. There's no cap on it. And so yes, there's probably medicines out there, I don't know. There's medicines that will now work on the glucagon, the alpha receptors, to lower that. So type 1s or type 2 insulin dependents are not chasing blood sugars all the time. Now, to answer your question about GLPs, there's always a downside to every medication, including a GLP. I mean, you do risk cancer, okay? You also risk the fact that GLPs could, we don't know, but they could cause fat cell hyperplasia, meaning growth of more fat cells. And so if you were to go off of your GLP and you have made more fat cells, and let's just say you go back to the diet you were eating, now you have more fat cells to fill up and you could get even more obese than you were, or more overweight than you were. GLPs also mess with our eyes. GLPs mess with our libido. GLPs mess with our gastric emptying. Is there a risk of getting bowel paralysis? Absolutely. So you have to look at the mechanisms of a GLP, how it works in our brain, how it works in our gut, how we are giving super physiologic doses of GLP, more than our body ever makes. We're giving that in hopes that we're not going to cause any side effects. So this is not medical advice, Amanda. It's something that you need to do some research on. If I were you, I would get more knowledgeable about side effects with GLPs. There's always a downside. Minimal carbs, to me, should be 0 carbs. You should be increasing muscle mass, so lifting weights. I would back off on doing extended bouts of cardio. I would do sprints or sprint-like activities on, like an elliptical or a rower or something like that. But you need to get your sugars down by increasing muscle. Muscle will soak up a lot of sugar, but first off, you shouldn't be eating them. So if your blood sugars are not controlled on long-acting insulin and short-acting insulin, we got a problem. But I'm guessing because of the lack of talk between the alpha and the beta cells, you're always chasing your glucagon. You're chasing blood sugars. You're going to be chasing blood sugars. Carlos says, is there a healthy kind of Braunschweiger? Hy-Vee only carries a sugar version. I think there's another one there. It's from a certain farm. It's not Oscar Mayer. It's another one. I can't remember the name. I don't believe it has sugar in it. Okay. Lara says Braunschweiger is so good, especially with cream cheese. Any brand is generally fine. It's liver, right? So Kroger sells it. I don't think, Lara, we don't have a Kroger around here. Misty says, I've seen that fish oil is chemically removed from the fish, even what we think are highly reputable companies. Again, another reason why not to consume it. My CRP and my A1C went up on a carnivore diet. What about your liver function? What about your iron levels? There's so many other things, Jillian, that you need to look into that you're not giving me enough information. I mean, your red blood cells might be living longer, on a carnivore diet, and your A1C will naturally go up. CRP, if you're just getting a single CRP and you have an elevation of CRP, I mean, a pimple on your butt can elevate your CRP. A cold, anything that causes inflammation can raise CRP. It's not very specific. You can get an interleukin-6, you can get some other inflammatory markers, get a ferritin level. That's an inflammatory marker. Lara says, when I saw the pond years ago, yeah, it's been years ago, but I've never seen the pond scum in India, so. You eat pasture-raised eggs, grass-fed beef, grass-fed butter, and other optimal protein fat sources. I think you're good. I really think you're good. If you're worried about it, get an omega-3 to omega-6 ratio. Just get a blood level. Amanda says, I agree with what you're saying. Amanda, I don't want anybody to take medications. That they don't need them. Sometimes I think we're taking the easy way out. I'm not saying that there is not a time and a place for a GLP, but I think we're using medications as a crutch because we don't want to make changes in our life. And I don't think that we look into all of the ramifications of what could be going on. And that scares me because there's not doctors out there that are giving informed consent. When we prescribe a medication as a physician, we should be giving you all of the pros and cons, all of the risks and all of the benefits. And we should be using a shared decision-making process when we talk to our patients. So if I give you the information, I want a back and forth of you asking me questions. And some of those questions might say, hey, what are your goals in life? And what are you willing to give up for a little bit of benefit? And what would you want to keep, it's kind of like thinking financially. For just a little bit of benefit, how much risk are you willing to take? And if you're a conservative person, you're going to look like, hey, you know what? I don't really like to take very much risk in order to get a benefit. But you're not deficient in GLP. I'm guessing you're not obese, Amanda. Many obese, but diabetics in general, once we've reached diabetes, guess what happens to GLP? It goes down. The production in our body in a diabetic or obese person, our GLP goes down. But the doses that doctors are prescribing are super physiologic doses. No studies have ever been done on them. You're the guinea pig, Amanda. We don't know what it's going to do to your eyes. We don't know if it's causing cancer. We don't know anything. We don't. And you're taking the word of a doctor who's never been trained in any of these things. In fact, lacks a lot of training. You're taking their word because they went to medical school like 30 years ago. For me, I went to medical school 30 years ago. Do you think what they taught me in medical school is still relevant today? No. In fact, what I learned last year is irrelevant today. For the most part, there's a lot of irrelevancy that I learned last year that is no longer relevant today. And you're trusting, it's like trusting your financial advisor. I wouldn't do that either. You have to question them. You have to ask questions, but you have to be taught. You have to ask questions and they have to supply you with information. You have to have enough information. Hold please, go lay down. They have to give you enough information in order to make good questions or to make good decisions. You cannot make a decision without enough information. I doubt that you've made some very, very important decisions without asking questions or without getting enough information. Okay? So, again, it's up to you. This is not medical advice, but, and I don't know enough of your history that I could even remotely give you a decision. I just need you to have information that when we put medicines, it's blocking, well, in this case, it's an inhibitor. It's a GLP-1 inhibitor. It's blocking a normal biologic process in our body. Why are we blocking it? And what is everything else downstream? Did we look into it? Okay. Question over here, is cholesterol really bad? Nope, cholesterol is really good. What else do we got? Jillian says, love the glucagon and cortisol connection. You know, here's the thing. Most people think that it's cortisol that causes the sugar problem. It is not. The sugar stimulating cell that's in the pancreas is the alpha cell in the islets of Langerhans, inside the endocrine part of the pancreas. The alpha cells produce glucagon. It is the glucagon that triggers the liver to make the glucose. It is not in any way cortisol that causes, somehow glucagon has to get involved. It's not just cortisol. Glucagon has to be involved. And yes, stress is a definite culprit. It's a culprit for a number of people. And when we stress, we don't sleep. And we don't sleep, we're in fight or flight all the time. We never have enough sympathetic relief, which is calming. We never have enough GABA receptors or GABA stimulation. We're always stressed. We're always in sympathetic fight or flight overdrive. And that's why we're seeing a lot of insulin resistance. But then again, we eat horribly and we don't exercise and we're exposed to heavy metals and we're drinking nanoplastics in our water and getting fluoride and getting all these things. So yeah, you guys, there's a lot. Being a reductionist and narrowing it all down to just one thing. Yeah. You are a physician who upholds the Hippocratic Oath. Yeah, first do no harm, right? Glucagon, cortisol, stress connection is what I needed to hear. I will listen and re-listen and study this more. Yeah, just keep listening and keep reading. Oh gosh, here's a 2.0er. That's awesome. Oh, very true. We are all going to die. Absolutely. If there's one thing that I can be assured of, vegan, we're all going to die. And so, yes, I think you should eat the food that makes you feel healthy and find joy in your life. Absolutely. I agree 100%. If you think that, we're all going to die, then go for it. If you just want to eat whatever you find joy in life, there's a lot of people who eat whatever they like and they absolutely find no joy in their life. They're depressed, they're suicidal, and it's likely related to the foods they eat. So great idea. We're all going to die. But if you want to continue thinking that you can just eat whatever you want and find joy in life, that's like saying, yeah, I got enough money and I find myself joyful. You're always going to be searching for the next dopamine hit. You're searching for dopamine. You are in sympathetic overdrive and you have no parasympathetic calming aspect. And yeah, you're probably going to die sooner than what you were expected to live. But go ahead, keep promoting your joy and just do whatever feels good. That's great. Q-Tip says, I have dyslipidemia. I'm guessing you have high triglycerides and low HDL and grade 1 non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. That's liver fat strangling out your liver. You're only 25 years old. What should you do? You should get some more tests. I don't know if you have diabetes. I don't know what caused your high triglycerides. If you have high triglycerides, what is your meaning of dyslipidemia? If you would like to consider a consult, I can go over all of your information and you can email me, Q-Tip, at IronLadyDoc@AOL.com. IronLady, IronLadyDoc, DOC, at AOL.com. Porsche says, morning doc, appreciate your positive message. Keep up the good work. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. It's always nice to hear some kind words. Q-Tip says, high LDL, low HDL, high triglycerides. Yep, that's metabolic syndrome right there, Q-Tip. That is insulin resistance, if not already diabetes. I mean, insulin resistance is diabetes. They just don't diagnose you. So you need further testing. Okay. Lara says the entire reason for eating consciously is not to be in constant pain like our parents are experiencing. The suffering is horrific. Pain when walking, standing, incontinence, joint pain. It's endless. We do not want to be in pain in our 70s and 80s. I agree. I agree. All right, you guys. I don't see any other questions. I appreciate everyone who has joined on YouTube and Instagram today. We do this every Saturday at 9 a.m. Central, and we do it every Sunday at 10 a.m. Central. I appreciate you guys being here, asking awesome questions, and helping others, because you never know when your question that you ask is not a question that a lot of people have and just were afraid to ask it. I hope that you guys have a blessed Sunday, and Lord willing, I'll be back next Saturday. For more like reels, catch me, subscribe, hit the thumbs up, do all the algorithmic things, and let's keep this going. Share, share, share. All right, you guys have a great day. See ya.